slide deck will be made available on the department's EPR webpage in the near future. So thank you for joining us today. My name is David McKenna, Director of the Waste Policy Group. Today on the call from Environment and Protected Areas, we have Carol Nelson, Jennifer Chapelski, Shalene Lacusta, Amos Encube, Rick Birkenbosch, and Scott Nickel. Jacqueline Schmidt will likely be joining us. I'm not sure if she's on the if she's online at this time. The presentation on the regulation will take approximately 35 to 40 minutes. Presentation will be an in-depth review of how the regulation works in plain language. There will be a time at the end of the presentation to ask questions. Given the large number of people on today's session, we will be muting participants during the presentation and will provide additional instructions at the end of the presentation when we get to the Q&A section. Questions can be asked throughout the presentation by typing them into the Q&A. The icon is shown on the right of the current slide. The chat function is not available for this presentation. Also, you will notice at the bottom of the slide, if you have any questions that you would prefer to direct directly to us, please follow up with us via the email aep.recyclingregulation@gov.ab.ca. This email will also be provided on the last slide of the presentation, and I'll leave that up for a period of time so people can copy it if necessary. So the session is an opportunity for us to walk through Alberta's new extended producer responsibility regulation. The regulation is available through the Alberta King's Printer online catalog. In October 2022, Alberta adopted new regulation to establish an overarching regulatory framework for EPR and set government expectations for EPR systems being designed for single-use products, packaging, and paper products, referred to as PPP, and hazardous and special products, HSP. We'll spend the first part of the presentation reviewing the key pieces of the regulation. For ease, the regulation can be thought of in three pieces. The first sets the framework and focuses on the core elements of EPR, including oversight and ensuring transparency and compliance. The framework is followed by two separate parts, part one for single-use product, packaging and paper products, or PPP, and part two for hazardous and special products, or HSP. The parts for each material stream allows for details specific to each material. For example, defining included materials, performance requirements, and identifying producers. Today's presentation will follow this general format. The structure of the regulation was intentionally to keep oversight requirements consistent for all EPR systems and if applicable, potential future oversight organizations. It also allows additional materials to be added to the regulation in the future as additional parts. The enabling regulatory framework provides details to describe what government wants to achieve. The how will follow in transition discussions with the Oversight Management Board and key stakeholders to inform oversight bylaws. As much as possible, Alberta drew from experience across Canada and beyond to inform Alberta's EPR framework. We'll walk through the regulation today, highlighting key pieces and areas where we've received questions so far. Following that, we'll speak to transition, timing, and next steps, followed by an opportunity for you to ask any clarifying questions. We'll start with the regulatory framework piece of the regulation, which includes such items as oversight bylaws, and offenses. If you're following along the regulation, the regulatory sections are sections number 1 through to 11 and sections 28 and 29. The first section, Section 1, includes the definitions for all parts of the EPR regulation. We won't go through the entire list of definitions, as most will be covered as we review the regulation, but we want to draw your attention to a few up front. We aim for consistency with other jurisdictions where possible, i.e. producer hierarchy, but some definitions are unique to Alberta, as Alberta has its own key industries, landscape, and legislative framework which were considered. Some considerations included the connection to Alberta's natural gas vision and strategy and Alberta's petrochemical industry leadership and diversification. As part of the natural gas vision and strategy, Alberta is pursuing efforts to divert plastic as a new value stream, creating jobs and generating revenue while decreasing environmental impacts from plastics waste. There is no definition for recycling in the EPR regulation, as it's already defined in Section 1 of the Environmental Protection and Enhancement Act. The recycling definition encompasses mechanical recycling processes, but it does not include all types of chemical or thermal treatment. We have included a definition for advanced chemical recycling. It is defined to allow for treatment processes for the conversion of plastics, including pyrolysis or gasification, which is important for Alberta's petrochemical industry and for maximizing end-of-life options for plastic waste management. Downcycling is defined to include management options that do not encourage a circular economy, but recognize that some material may have a local suitable reuse. Downcycling includes composting, waste to energy, waste to land application, and aggregate substitutions. Most treatment processes also have obligations under the activities designation regulation and will be required to obtain an APIA approval or authorization. These are separate requirements to ensure the processing activities do not create releases or impacts to the environment. These definitions will help create clear expectations for producers and processors. The use of the downcycling definition is covered on a later slide in the material management requirements and Section 19 of the EPR regulation. Oversight, Sections 2 through 10 of the regulation. Alberta drew from its long history of third-party administration and oversight of its existing stewardship programs and has delegated oversight of EPR systems to a third-party management board. The Alberta Recycling Management Authority is named in the regulation as the management board for Alberta's first two designated material streams, PPP and HSP. The regulation intentionally keeps flexibility throughout, recognizing how quickly the worlds of circular economy and EPR are expected to evolve. This includes flexibility for different management boards to potentially provide oversight in the future. The Alberta Recycling Management Authority, ARMA. For those of you not familiar with ARMA, they are the existing board in Alberta that are currently responsible to government for operating Alberta's non-EPR stewardship programs for used oil, paint, tires, and electronics. ARMA will continue to deliver these programs in addition to its new mandate of EPR oversight. Similar to Alberta's existing stewardship programs, the ARMA and any future management boards have the ability to create bylaws in order to operationalize the regulation. The GOA is leading the transition of existing systems to EPR until a mandate agreement and bylaw policies are in place. Oversight expectations. The oversight will include bylaws which will be drafted over the next few months with input from stakeholders. The tools will ensure compliance within the EPR system. For EPR system development, GOA will retain strong connection to ARMA through a mandate agreement, which is a regulated requirement, development of the board's initial bylaws, and review of any subsequent bylaw amendments or new bylaws. EPA is working closely with ARMA to develop a mandate agreement in spring 2023. The mandate agreement will clarify roles and responsibilities of EPA and the ARMA, as well as communicate government's expectations, objectives, and accountabilities. EPA will provide clear direction to the ARMA's scope within the mandate agreement, with careful consideration given to value added and costs. This agreement is between EPA and ARMA and dictates the deliverables that ARMA is responsible for, and the specific details are currently under development. More details on the bylaw will be forthcoming over the next few months. The regulation provides what the government wants the regulation to achieve, and the ARMA bylaws will provide the details which will operationalize the regulatory requirements. EPA is ensuring there will be a strong connection between the mandate agreement and the oversight bylaws. I'll get into a bit more detail on the oversight bylaws on the next slide. Bylaws, Section 5. The regulation provides a range of bylaw making authorities for the ARMA, including those listed here on the slide. For example, the mandate agreement will outline the government's expectations in regards to the revenue exemption thresholds, keeping the specific thresholds of regulation out of the regulation provides a more flexible mechanism to change these if needed due to a number of consequences, including inflation. The ARMA will be working closely with EPA and stakeholders, i.e. through stakeholder advisory tables, to develop the initial bylaws. A transition advisory group, which will be convened in the new year, will provide input to the bylaws. Stakeholder input from the spring 2021 engagement process is being referred to help us inform the bylaws. Section 6. ARMA will be required to provide advance notice to the minister regarding changes to the bylaws. There are a couple of key offenses in the regulation. There will be other fines and penalties developed through the bylaws. The most important offense is related to the registration through ARMA. No producer shall supply a designated material in Alberta unless the producer is registered with the authority. The registration must be valid and not suspended or canceled. There will be opportunities for ARMA to cancel or suspend the registration if the producers fail to meet the obligations as specified in bylaw. The other offenses are related to service standards and the material management requirements as specified in Table 1 and Table 2 of the regulation. These offenses align with other regulatory offenses under the regulation. Indicated in Part 3, Section 28, the expiry date of the regulation is June 30th, 2030. Material streams are designated through parts of the regulation. The EPR regulation currently includes two EPR systems: the single-use products, packaging, and paper products, or PPP for short, outlined in Part 1 of the regulation, and hazardous and special products outlined in Part 2 of the regulation. The regulation could be expanded in the future to designate additional material streams under additional parts. If you're following along in the regulation, Part 1 is section number 12 through to section 20. Part 1, PPP definitions. Part 1 of the regulation includes definitions that are specific to the sections within this part. There are definitions for single-use products, packaging, paper products, and packaging-like products that are designated. ARMA has the ability under Section 5 to further delve into product categories and provide additional clarity via bylaws. For example, although the single-use products definition includes party supplies, items like balloons or ribbons could be exempted. To support harmonization and achieve necessary economies of scale in Western North America, Alberta's definitions of single-use products, packaging-like products, and paper products mirror those in British Columbia's EPR regulations. Alberta's EPR framework is only being applied to material from residential premises at this time, i.e. single-family dwellings and multiple family dwelling units. Material generated in the industrial, commercial, and institutional sectors, i.e. schools, hospitals, long-term care facilities, and hotels, are excluded at this time. Designations. Under Part 1 of the regulation, single-use products, packaging, paper products, and packaging-like products are designated. This is where the exclusions are found. Current stewardship programs are excluded. For example, a beverage container is excluded from the designation, from this designation. Section 14. The producer hierarchy provides clarity on identifying the obligated steward. The producer of a designated material will be the brand owner, that which has the greatest decision-making power over a product. Where there is no brand owner, a producer hierarchy will be used to identify the obligated producer. After brand owner comes importer, followed by retailer. Section 15. The regulation enables a charitable exemption, a revenue threshold exemption, and a material supply exemption. As already mentioned, specific exemption thresholds will be set in bylaws as we recognize the need to evolve and adjust thresholds over time. GOA will be providing ARMA with initial direction on the thresholds to be set in bylaw. The revenue exemption will be 1.5 million. Supply thresholds will be material dependent. For example, paper will be 9 tons. Section 16. Producers will be individually liable for meeting regulatory requirements. However, producer responsibility organization can be appointed by a producer to act on its behalf for many producers. Section 16, collection requirements. Ensures all designated material, regardless of the producer, goes to the same system for sorting and recycling, i.e. a common collection system. This is important to make sure that recycling is practical and efficient for users. Households should not be required to sort and separately set out products within the material type. This approach makes it easier for users, households, which is critical for EPR to achieve its environmental outcome of diverting more waste. Alternative collection systems can be authorized by ARMA, i.e. return to retail. Section 17, service standards for single family and 18 multifamily dwellings. Outlines the transition from existing municipally run collection to producer run collection systems for single family dwellings. ARMA will be able to provide more details on the common collection system through its bylaws. Single family homes, infills and urban expansions, construction are included in phase 1, April 2025, where those communities have recycling services when the regulation came into force. Communities currently without curbside recycling service, but that have waste curbside collection now will be included in phase 2, October 2026. Multifamily homes. First, by April 2025, producers will provide service to dwellings which currently receive recycling collection service from their local government as of the coming into force date. Second, by October 2026, service providers will expand service to those multifamily dwellings which don't currently receive service from their local government as of the coming into force date. Section 19, material management requirements. Material management requirements are set based on the amount of material managed through recycling in relation to the total amount of designated material supplied to the residential markets. Alberta's requirements align with the lower of the performance management targets in BC and Ontario, then gradually increase to drive continuous improvement. Aligning targets to other jurisdictions helps to create an economy of scale, conditions for economic innovation within Alberta. Advanced chemical recycling is included in a management option for plastics. Downcycling can also be used, but it is limited to 15% of the overall management requirement. This slide is a visual representation of the previous table. Material management requirements are set based on the amount of material managed through recycling in relation to the total amount of designated material supplied to the residential markets. The material management requirements are not how much material is collected, but how much material is recycled. As previously indicated, downcycling can also be used, but it is limited to 15% of the overall management requirements. Section 20. Pros must be not-for-profit established entity, and they cannot be affiliated with an entity or individual that provides recycling, collection, or processing for PPP designated material. As mentioned, part of the EPR regulation is for PPP, and part 2, which we're about to view, is for HSP. If you're following along through the regulation, part 2 is section number 21 through section 27. Similar components and structure to part 1 on PPP, so I won't go through in as much detail. Material definitions are provided, not going to go through them as there's a ton of text. Work towards harmonization with other provinces where possible. Although Alberta's definitions for flammable products, corrosive products, and toxic products are unique, they align with Manitoba and Saskatchewan. Alberta's definition for pesticides is unique, though it aligns with British Columbia, Manitoba, and Ontario in concept. Each of the product definitions includes container size limits, as the intention is to capture products typically sold for residential use at retailers such as Canadian Tire, Home Depot, and Lowe's, and not products in quantities sold for commercial use. As in PPP, the HSP producer hierarchy is provided to provide clarity on identifying the obligated stewards. Collection requirements. Minimum collection service is based on community population size. The standards are based on maintaining or increasing current service levels. At minimum, depots for larger communities and events in smaller communities will be required. ARMA can make bylaws to provide details on how system works. As with PPP, ARMA can also authorize alternative collections, i.e. return to retailer. Material management requirements. Only batteries as other HSP products are consumable products, and the ideal situation is consumers consume all the product they purchase. The table is provided based on the collection standard for HSP as listed in section 25. Access for communities is not limited to residential waste only, but the regulated products that are designated a smaller size and do not include bulk containers. Where community is serviced by a permanent collection site by a community authority, for example, a regional landfill or transfer station, a producer shall maintain the current site or provide a replacement permanent collection site. Once the HSP is no longer in the possession of the generator or homeowner, the waste must be stored in accordance with the waste control regulation. This is similar to the hazardous household waste diversion program currently in effect. ARMA can make bylaws to provide details on how the system works. As with PPP, ARMA can also authorize alternative collection, i.e. return to retail. Material management requirements. Most HSP products are consumable products, and the ideal situation is consumers consuming all the product they purchase. Batteries are not consumable and are the only HSP product that we want all that are sold back. Therefore, we have set material management targets for batteries. Battery means a product that is a container consisting of one or more voltaic or galvanic cells in which chemical energy is stored as electricity or converted into electricity and is used as a source of power, but does not include 1, lead acid batteries, or 2, batteries weighing 5 kilograms or more. A producer must collect and achieve recovery and recycling of batteries only through recycling. The material management requirement is the amount of the designated material that is recycled in accordance with the regulation divided by the amount that is designated material type the producer supplies in Alberta, expressed as a percentage. The material management requirements will also increase per year over year, and producers will be required to continuously improve their collection, recovery, and recycling rates. A producer responsibility organization must be a not-for-profit entity. Section 27 describes how pros cannot be affiliated with an entity or individual that provides recycling, collection, or processing of HSP designated material. Transition and implementation. In this section, we'll give an update on the EPR transition. To date, Environment and Protected Areas, EPA, has led the analysis and the establishment of Alberta's EPR framework. ARMA has been named in regulation as the delegated authority responsible for oversight of the first 2 EPR systems for single-use products, packaging and paper products, and hazardous and special products in Alberta. EPA continues to lead the EPR transition, is working closely with ARMA with establishing the EPR oversight system in Alberta, including establishing the formal oversight agreement. EPA is also supporting ARMA with policy analysis to draft bylaws and develop oversight priorities, operational plans, and resourcing. ARMA is at the same time developing a transitional budget to meet current startup needs and future operational costs of the EPR oversight and implementation role. EPR will be fully funded by producers, including its oversight. Timelines. Some of these dates have been highlighted through the presentation already, and some of these dates are in regulation. Here's a quick summary. 2023 will focus on 3 main areas. 1, establishing oversight function for the Alberta Recycling Management Authority. 2, bylaw development. 3, setting up the registration system. Many of these items are already underway since fall of 2022. It is expected that registration process for producers and communities will start in the fall of 2023. This will provide critical information to obligated producers to inform future design considerations. There are a number of private and municipal assets that will likely be essential to support the smooth and timely transition to a producer-funded and operated EPR system in Alberta. Obligated producers should start to look at the regulatory obligations now and start making some preliminary decisions on how they want to collaborate to achieve these obligations, either through a collective or a producer responsibility organization. Further stakeholder involvement. Similar to Alberta's existing stewardship programs, the ARMA and any future management boards have the ability to create bylaws in order to operationalize the regulation. This allows for the regulation to be higher level, allowing for greater flexibility within the system outside of having to make regulatory amendments. There will be an opportunity for a transition advisory working group to review and provide feedback on these draft bylaws. Membership for this working group will be determined in collaboration between ARMA and the department, and meetings are targeted to begin in early 2023. We will now end the recording. Questions can be asked through the presentation